All right. Well, good morning, Rotary District 7770, and welcome to Conversations with Rotary Action People for Monday, January 25th. My name is Donald Hovis, your CWRAP host, and I'm from the Chicora Rotary Club in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. We're pleased to be joined today from Shaw Air Force Base, Col Lawrence Sullivan. We look forward to your presentation in just a few minutes. Up first, some announcements. You'll see her on here, but I want to give a shout out to our Public Image Chair, Mary Gask, and our District Governor, Pauline Levesque. They're at the second pilot location of Rotary Ready, doing 1,500 vaccinations today in Florence. So thank you, ladies, for what you're doing. For those of you that have been on the calls on Friday and the Rotary Ready calls last week, as of today, there are no dates scheduled for the future. However, this is going to be a 6-month journey. So I call your attention to rotaryready.com. If you want to sign up and volunteer, that's where dates will be posted for future events. Do keep this in mind. If you sign up for an area to volunteer, that does not mean you are confirmed as a volunteer. You actually receive a confirmation email of your volunteerism prior to that event. So if you don't get an email, then that means you're not a confirmed volunteer, folks. So just stay tuned to your email. More information to come on that. But thank you, Mary and Pauline, for what you're doing over in Florence today. All right. Several of you have already introduced yourself in the chat box. So those of you that haven't, please go to the chat box as well, your name and your Rotary Club. At this time, I'll ask Col Lawrence Sullivan to come off of mute. And sir, introduce yourself to us.
Hey, my name's Larry Sullivan. I appreciate the invitation, and I'm happy to be a part of this today. I'm the base commander here at Shaw Air Force Base, just outside of Sumter, South Carolina. I'm also the commander of the 20th Fighter Wing. So just a quick overview. We have 79 F-16s assigned here. About a third of our force is actively deployed around the globe, primarily in the Middle East. And the rest of us are either training and are ready to go at a moment's notice. We've got about 8,800 people that come to the base every day to work, including dependents and retirees and other beneficiaries from our medical treatment facility. We've got about 32,000 residents that we help out in some way or another. Base has been here a long time. I've been here since May. Happy to be a part of the community. And our goal here is to be good neighbors while still prepping to accomplish our mission in support of national defense.
So where were you before coming to Shaw?
I was stationed in Kunsan, South Korea. So the 8th Fighter Wings and F-16 based there in South Korea. Spent a year there. That's an assignment away from your families for a year. Everybody lives in dormitories, and we don't have any facilities for schools or anything like that. And then my wife's in the Air Force as well, and she was stationed at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. And so I came back May last year. Rejoined with the family, and then we all headed down here to South Carolina.
Excellent. And I know, I believe from talking with Lisa, you have a screen share presentation you want to do, and you'll be able to just hit the screen share there at the bottom, I believe.
I don't have that capability here on the systems that we have. There's some silly government restrictions on the stuff that we can do, so it's a minor miracle that I'm on this call right now. So sorry about that, though.
Gotcha.
I can talk through that, and happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
Sure. So what I'll say, folks, if you have a question for Colonel, post that in the chat box, and I will call those out to him towards the end of today's presentation. But take it away, sir.
All right. So just to give you a quick overview of some of the things that happen here at Shaw. If it's things your community knows already, sorry to waste your time. But there's a lot that goes on here at this base that many people aren't tracking. And so a lot of acronyms and a lot of different organizations, but I'll just give you a quick overview of the things that are happening here in your state, here in South Carolina. And a lot of our airmen and soldiers assigned here as part of your communities are coming to work every day to accomplish. And so I mentioned, the base itself, the installation and the facilities, that's run by the 20th Fighter Wing. And then we have those jets that we deploy as well. We also have people that work here, we call them tenant units, and they are some higher headquarter functions. And so for the United States, Central Command runs all of our combat operations and potential combat operations in the Middle East and parts of Africa. The Central Command headquarters are down at Tampa, Florida. But the air component and the land component for Central Command headquarters are both stationed here at Shaw. So there's a 3-star general from the Army that's in charge of Army Forces Central. And then there's a 3-star general from the Air Force in charge of Air Forces Central. So we refer to those guys as RCENT and AFCENT. Those command staffs are approximately 1,000 people each. So they work in buildings here at the base. We maintain high bandwidth, data for them in and out of theater. And so as people quarterback the air war and the ground war, troop movements in and out of the Middle East, that all gets scheduled and planned here at Shaw Air Force Base. We also have an attack group. And so the MQ-1, MQ-9 drones that you've seen, in the news, those are actively operated out here at Shaw. So we have, they look like shipping containers, but they're actually, full of computers and screens. And we have airmen in there 24 hours a day. And so right now out of Shaw, there's somewhere between 4 and 6 drone missions being actively controlled, and that's global, right? So we hit the internet from here, bounce off some satellites, and then we can be remotely operating those planes. Those operations are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they're in support of live operations just about anywhere you can imagine. So that's a mission, a large mission that happens here at Shaw. And then in the Air Force hierarchy, a wing is what Shaw Air Force Base would be. There's a wing up at Seymour Johnson, the 4th Fighter Wing. There's one down at Moody, Georgia. There's a wing down in Charleston. The organization that sits on top of those wings is called a numbered Air Force. And so 15th Air Force is stationed here at Shaw. They just happen to have their headquarters co-located with us. And so there's a staff there of a few hundred people. And they have the general that runs that is in charge of all the conventional combat air power in the continental United States. And so for fighters and rescue and wings like that, also some cyber and intelligence components and command and control. And so he resides here at Shaw. And that's just a quick overview of who comes to work here and what we do every day.
So being in Myrtle Beach, I know you guys deploy some of the F-16s down here, usually to do some touch and goes. Usually you practice here on the runway, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's right. And so, we want to be good neighbors, but jets are loud, and we need to train all hours of the night at times. And so one of our, part of being those good neighbors is trying to minimize that as best we can. One way we do that is we do a lot of our training in the overwater airspace. And so there's a big chunk of restricted airspace for military use off the East Coast. And so it goes from some of the Outer Banks out there on North Carolina all the way south past Savannah and just a few miles, east of the coast out to maybe a couple hundred miles. And so we call those the Whiskies. That's the warning area over water. It's a kind of an air traffic control term. But we average 70 to 100 trading sorties a day out of Shaw. And the bulk of those end up going over to the airspace. And so we fly over Charleston and Myrtle Beach to and from just about every single time. And if you're not familiar, the F-16 is a single engine fighter, which makes it really lightweight and high performance. But we're always keeping a close track on where the closest runway is in case something happens. And so we carry Myrtle Beach. We call that an emergency divert. So if there's a pending issue with the engine or fuel system or oil malfunction or something like that, we can drop into Myrtle Beach as a safety recovery point. And so we always know exactly where that is and how far away it is. And we see it just about every day.
So explain kind of the thrill when you get those engines roaring. I'm sure that's got to be a huge thrill, right?
Yeah, we call it the world's greatest sports car. So you'll, it's a fun airplane just to fly. It's not that much harder than a Cessna to take off and land by design. It goes a little bit faster, but what that does is it allows us to spend the rest of our brain power using it as a weapon. And so it's loaded with sensors around the airplane, and it's got a radar and a targeting pod and a few other sensors, and allows us to perceive the environment that we're in, find the adversary, and then employ weapons precisely after that. But yeah, just ripping off the runway, taking off and coming back. It's pretty cool by itself.
So for those that don't know a lot about the F-16, how fast can it go? And in how quick of time?
Yeah, you bet. So the top speed is over Mach 2, which 1,500, 1,700 miles an hour, something like that. It gets weird with air speeds and altitudes and all that. We don't often go that fast. There's not really a tactical need for it. But in terms of getting up there and doing that, we can be from a dead start there at the end of the runway and above airliner altitudes in less than 30 seconds. So its thrust to weight ratio, it has more thrust than the airplane weighs. And so for the initial portion of that profile, it accelerates a little faster than a rocket, just going straight up and then get up there. We cruise at higher than airliner altitudes and a lot faster than airliner altitudes and kind of a fuel conserve profile. And then you push up the thrust and you'll be above supersonic. We're often employing long range air missiles at Mach 1.2 or 1.5.
Wow. How hard is it to control?
It's well, so I'm a pilot by trade. I grew up flying the F-16. I've been flying about 20 years. Most of my job now is with the installation proper, but I still fly once a week or twice a week to maintain a baseline of proficiency. We let on like it's really hard, so people think we're cool, right? But it's a lot happens very quickly. The challenging part is kind of taking in all that information. It's kind of a rough analogy is kind of like driving a minivan. Is driving a minivan that hard? Like, no, not really. But if you've got two radios on two different channels and maybe you've got kids in the backseat going crazy and someone's trying to hit you from another lane, that portion of it, like juggling all those things at the same time is where the challenge comes in. And so those are the things that we train to. The flight controls on the jet, it is fly-by-wire, which means that if you made a paper airplane out of an F-16 and threw it, it would immediately tumble out of the air, kind of like a dollar bill would. So it doesn't glide like an airliner might or a nice paper airplane, which means that the flight controls on the back twitch 60 times a second. So think of it as like balancing a yardstick on your finger. It immediately wants to fall over, right? And as you move around and balance that yardstick, you keep it straight up. That does a couple things for us. It makes us very maneuverable. So when you do want to change direction, you can do it very rapidly. And so there's a lot of computers in there helping you fly nice and smooth, but it gives you the ability to maneuver extremely aggressively in like a dogfighting scenario when you need to.
Wow. Sounds really, really neat. All right. So we're going to go to some questions here submitted by the chat box here. I got several good ones coming your way. So if you have any questions, folks, post those in the chat box and we'll get them asked the Colonel here. So first one is, I believe that Shaw is now a joint base. Please explain what a joint base is and how the various elements coordinate activities. You
bet. So the term joint base has a specific meaning in the way the DoD runs stuff, and we are not technically a joint base. I'd say, I don't know the timeline, 10 or 15 years ago, Congress observed that there was an Air Force base and an Army base or Army post like right next to each other, but they had two different, it'd be like having two towns that shared a border but had two different mayors, and it was very inefficient. And so what they did is they combined those, and there are 13 joint bases around the world right now. And so they share ownership and share responsibility between the services. And so Shaw is not one of those. And so we are strictly Shaw Air Force Base, but we just happen to have buildings here that Army personnel work out of, and we take care of them. And so it's more of a vocabulary distinction than anything else. And there's different cultures there too, and different missions and different computer administrative stuff. So there's a lot of service specific things that we try to do. And we work through all of that and make sure that the Army represented here at Shaw and any other services that come through have everything they need to get the job done.
Excellent. So what is you've flown a lot of F-16s, but is that your favorite aircraft to fly, or what is your favorite aircraft to fly?
Yeah, all my professional experience is in the F-16 primarily, and that's the one I've trained in and gotten good at, over the years. I've had a chance to fly in a bunch of other airplanes once or twice, it was just been really cool. So those are always a thrill. Had a chance to fly in B1s and F15s and F18s and a bunch of helicopters too. And so they're all different. You barely know. I mean, you're along for the ride on those. You're not checked out. Just to get a basic qualification in those machines takes a few months and a lot of money. And so it's more of a one ride experience. As the people that design airplanes, you don't want two that do the exact same thing, right? You want them to focus in on specialties. And so it's always neat to see what other airplanes are designed to do better and different than the platform you're familiar with.
Next question is about the drone information you were talking about earlier. Do you have any internet delays related to the drone activity?
Yeah, the speed of light's really fast, but it's not instant, so there are, challenges with that. There are, theoretical limits onto how fast you could actually do it and minimize the delay. We here at the base do everything we can to make sure that there's no delays that are avoidable on our end. So stuff getting hung up in server rooms or, internet access. And so that stuff's very redundant. And it's a high priority for us to keep that up and running. But some of those drones, if they're on the opposite side of the world and we're bouncing the controls off the satellites, there can be a little bit of a delay. You put an input in and the jet doesn't respond immediately. And so it's actually a challenge sometimes following high-speed vehicles that are maneuvering, because the video you're seeing is a few seconds delayed. And then the commands you put in to move the sensor are also a few seconds delayed. But the teams here are really talented. There's techniques to work around those limitations, and then they still get the job done.
So as a professional photographer in my world, I have my drone license to be able to fly. I have my 007 license. And obviously I can only go for certain distances in short amount of times. Can you explain a little bit more the type of drone you're using and then where these things are going? It sounds like they're going all the way around the world.
Yeah, so that it's a very interesting mission, right? So the drones are huge. I mean, it's not, and we don't launch them out of here. So there are no drone aircraft at Shaw Air Force Base. And so we have the video cockpit, and then it's an internet connection to the actual machine, which gives them a lot of flexibility, right? So you don't need a lot of infrastructure, and you can pack those things up in a crate and put them on the back of a C-130 or other cargo airplane, fly them into a location. I'm oversimplifying this, pop the wings on and you're pretty much ready to go. There's a small control station at the outbase called the launch and recovery element that does line of sight control with no latency to the airplane, because you need that to land. You can't have a multi-second delay trying to land something. But once they get in the airborne, they do a handoff, and there's a lot of the drones, if you look, there's kind of a bulbous nose, looks kind of like a beluga whale in the front. That's actually a carbon fiber hollow dome, and there's a little parabolic satellite dish, a little Millennium Falcon dish sitting up there, and that thing is what's getting the signal from the satellites. And so the guys here at Shaw, they hop into their cockpits, and then their controls and all their screens go into the internet via fiber, and then they pop out, hit the satellites, bounce around the world, and then talk to the airplane that way. And so the primary ones that are controlling have a wingspan in excess of 50 feet. They weigh tens of thousands of pounds. They can fly for 24 hours. And there's different versions of them. And if they can fly 20,000 foot block, 15, 20, 25,000 feet, not quite as high as an airliner. And they can carry an array of weapons. So the Hellfire anti-tank missile, anti-personnel missile, and some guided weapons, GPS guided weapons in the 500-pound bomb class. And so, and then they're on station for a really long time. And so what the teams will do, you don't want a team of humans work in that mission for 24 hours straight. So the teams here have shift work where they overlap with each other. So there's a fresh set of eyes on the machine every so many hours.
Are you expecting to be called upon to support the COVID vaccine distribution in the state?
We are. So the leaders in Washington, D.C. make a distribution decision, and some of the national supply of vaccine has gone to the DoD for national security reasons. We have some actually strict prohibitions on exactly talking numbers and priorities and things like that, because it's a very sensitive topic. And so we have a medical group here. We don't have a full hospital here at the base, but we have a clinic and a bunch of doctors and a team that does that kind of stuff. And we do immunizations for everything else all the time. And so we've started our COVID vaccine distributions here as of a few weeks ago. And so for some of our core essential members here on the base, just like in the local community, for first responders, so our defenders, our firefighters, and our medical professionals, they were in that very high tier, just like the rest of the United States for healthcare providers. And so they've received the first rounds of vaccine. And then we expect more. One thing we have the team working through constantly here is what's the quickest possible way we can get that vaccine administered and while still complying with the priorities. And it's, as you've heard through the news, there's a lot of fragility there in the supply chain that has to be frozen at an extremely cold temperature. And there's limitations on once you thaw it, how quickly you have to use it. So it's not just a drive up window and you can stick someone in the arm as soon as they're ready. We have to get groups of 5 people ready to go before we thaw out one of those vials and make sure there's zero waste. So a very complex scheduling challenge. One of the benefits of being in the military is that if you serve 20 years, you receive your retirement benefits, which is healthcare for life, and that includes your spouse if you were married during that time. And so there are a number of retirees that have been out of the service for a while but earn those benefits, and they still receive benefits from the VA system. And it's our responsibility to vaccinate those members as well. And so as the priorities in the country have shifted towards certain demographic slices, so you've heard discussions about 75 and up and 65 and up and prioritizing those tiers of members. We're in the process of contacting them and scheduling them for a vaccination as a method to get them taken care of as quickly as possible. And so that is ongoing here as well. Got a great team. These are all challenges that nobody really practiced for, or there's no checklist or manual on how to solve these issues. But I was actually walking through our vaccination center here on base. We had an old base theater. The base has been around since the 1940s. So if you can imagine a 1940s little theater, that was built. And it was on our list of buildings that we were going to abandon and tear down just as the base refreshes things. And there's much nicer theaters in town now that people can go see movies. It wasn't in bad condition, but it wasn't actively used. And so we did a quick renovation project on that, made it safe, took over the parking lot. And now we have a streamlined vaccine flow through line. So a processing facility that keeps people safe and spaced out while they're doing it, trying to get that place wired for internet because you have to log all the information into the computer systems, put in some refrigeration capability over there and set that up as a high volume vaccine distribution point. And so right now we don't have a lot to give out, but if the deliveries ramp up or scale, we're making sure that we're in a position to help out the community and get that thing out as quickly as it's delivered.
Next, I want you to comment on the strong partnership between Shaw Air Force Base and the Sumter community via the long-standing Shaw-Sumter Community Relations Council coordinated with the mayor's office in Shaw.
You bet. And so, that's one of the very best parts about this job is the relationship we have with our teammates here in the community. The Air Force doesn't tell you where you're going next until just a few months prior. They're always trying to figure out, what jobs. And so I was in Korea about a year ago when I found out that I was going to be coming here to be the part of the base. And maybe just a couple of minutes after I received the official notification from the Air Force, I got an email to my personal email account from the former mayor of Shaw and kind of a local figurehead around here, introducing himself and welcoming me and my family to the community. And it's been just, uphill since then too, getting better all the time. And so they made the transition here very, very pleasant and effective right off the bat. COVID's tamped down some of the social interaction that we would do in larger groups. But there's a unique relationship between the city of Sumter and the county of Sumter. It seems like those two groups get along very, very well, and it's very constructive. And then there's a strong network of support for the base from each one of those camps. And so For the county manager and the city manager, in terms of the day-to-day execution of stuff, I'm on the phone with them a few times a week. It could be every day. Sometimes with the mayor, there was a new mayor elected here, David Merchant, back in December, and had a chance to get to know his family. He has 4 kids. I have 3. They're pretty close to being the same age. And he's only a couple years older than I am. And we've hit it off and had a budding friendship built out of that. I was actually able to, in December, about a month ago, give him a F16 ride. So a couple of our jets are 2-seaters. And so to familiarize him with the mission here at the base, and he's been a long-time Sumter resident, but hadn't seen it from the inside of an F16, right? And so we went and did a mission, flew out over Virginia, West Virginia, Tennessee, and Georgia for a little bit. Came back over the base, overflew Clemson Stadium, where he's an alumni. And then he's also a business owner here in Sumter. So we found his business, flew over that in City Hall, lit the afterburner for a second, and made that mission happen. So that was a lot of fun. But we tackle a lot of problems together as a team. There are challenges at every Air Force installation and every community for employment and education, and support to our airmen, the housing market, access to care, the provider network. A lot of our healthcare is done by local private healthcare networks, and so we have a really tight working relationship on each one of those topics. And underlying all that's a really strong friendship that allows us to hit everything straight ahead and find a solution.
Who is your major foreign technological competitor?
Good question. So it's constantly evolving. And, the Cold War was defined by the challenge or the competition between the Soviet Union and in the United States. In that contest, there was a lot of technological development, areas that we were ahead, or at times the Soviets were ahead, like the space program and fighter jets and radars and surface-to-air missile systems, and those things go back and forth all the time. And so, the Russians are still a very, highly advanced, capable country with a lot of nuclear weapons pointed at the United States. They've sold a lot of their equipment around the world. So anybody that has that high-end equipment, that was a challenge for us in Vietnam. It was a challenge for us in Desert Storm and in the more recent conflicts in the Middle East. We've all been watching China as they've developed. It's good that they've pulled 1 billion of their people out of desperate poverty into something like a middle class, or better than it was, with better life expectancy and better quality of life. But they have a growing demand for resources, and at some point it becomes potentially zero sum as they're one to expand their influence, territorial boundaries, and economic influence in a region that we have a lot of allies in. And so they've invested heavily. They've stolen a lot of, or borrowed, I would say, on the internet, a lot of business trade secrets and military secrets and things like that. And so it's a challenging world out there, and everybody that could be a potential adversary continues to develop their capabilities and forces us to change the threats that we train against, and make sure that our capabilities are evolving to match and ideally exceed those of anybody that you could come up against.
Does the F16 Viper demo team fall under your command?
It does, yeah. So thanks for bringing that up. The most people know the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds. Those are stationed at different bases. One's obviously for the Navy, and then for the Air Force. What we have here at Shaw is the F16 demo team. So think of it kind of like a one-jet Thunderbird show. A simplistic definition. It's a gray F16 combat coded. One of our pilots here at the base, that's his kind of primary job. He's an instructor pilot and maintains combat capability across the board regardless. And then we, in a normal year without COVID, we'd send them on the road just about every weekend of the summer to hit air shows all around the United States, and then all around the world, internationally. And it does a couple of things that for other countries considering purchasing the F-16 or other fighters from America, it's a demonstration of the capabilities of the jet. For our citizens across the United States, it shows, what their airmen are doing to protect them, and it's a recruiting tool as well. And so that team is stationed out of here. They use the jets assigned to Shaw Air Force Base, and their funding and organization and scheduling is all run out of here as well. So we're really proud of those guys. It's awesome. They're all young. There are 1 or 2 pilots and a handful of maintainers, and I've got zero hesitation to send them on the road. Leading their own team, running their own show, no direct supervision or anything like that from the base. We've trained them up and checked them out, and then they are the very epitome of professionalism and skill. The jet demo itself, it's about a 20-25 minute routine. It's extremely aggressive. Since it's one airplane, you can get a lot lower and a lot faster and maneuver much more aggressively than if you're 6 jets all trying to stay together like the other Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds do. So understanding how the airplane works and how it flies, I watch it every single time we have a practice here, just because of how aggressively they maneuver and how cool the show is.
When was the F-16 introduced to the Air Force?
Yeah, first flight was a couple of weeks ago, 43 years ago, for the white F-16. It was a developmental prototype. The first operational units were right around 1980. And if you saw one from then and a picture of one and saw a picture of one today, they would look kind of the same from the outside. But the insides of the airplane have evolved constantly. So we're on multiple revisions of the engine to make it a lot more powerful. And then now, more importantly than that, are the sensors and the software. And so we receive, kind of like your smartphone gets an update every so many months, we do the same thing with the software on the jet. So we're always adding new weapons, new sensors, and new capability. And so the thing's a beast from just a pure aerodynamic performance perspective. So it gets high and gets fast, and that part hasn't changed. But its lethality continues to improve year over year.
You mentioned earlier about a ride along, and the next one is kind of a comment from a viewer here. It says, I'm not checked out in an F-16, but I would sure like to know if I could do a ride along. Can you make that happen? That comes from our buddy Bart there.
Bart, okay. Yeah, well, Bart, I wish I could give every person I know and meet in town and in the community one. We've only got a couple of those 2-seaters, and we actually have a program here on the base, and we use it as a kind of a reward or incentive tool so our best airman of the year would get a backseat ride. A career crew chief might get a backseat ride, and maybe the mayor of Sumter. So, but other than that, our hands are tied on how many of those we can give out.
And now, of every question or comment posted, I think this one, we all should remember this. And this is actually, when you think about this, it's really, really cool. So in Sumter, we love to hear the planes from Shaw flying overhead. We call it the sound of freedom.
Yeah.
I love that. That is awesome.
Yeah, that's one way to talk about jet noise. And that's what that is. And so, as we wrap this up, I ask you to keep in mind, we have about 500 airmen from the base right now deployed around the world. A lot of those are inside the threat range of Iranian missiles or other factors like that. They're going to work in body armor, and they're flying jets, and they're dropping bombs. On behalf of all of us, we're back here in beautiful South Carolina, not under an immediate threat. And what we do every day here at Shaw is we train those up. I talked about some of the fun aspects of the airplane, but it is a weapon, and it's a hard one to use. And in a couple of months, the next rotation is going to go down range. And so we're trying to use every ounce of training time that we have here to be as good as we can. Our Super Bowl is always a couple of weeks away, right? And we need to make every single practice count. And so that sound of freedom, if it's in the middle of your lunch hour or in the middle of the night or on the way to and from the training areas over Myrtle Beach, know that the airmen inside of those cockpits and the thousands of airmen getting the jets in the air and making the mission happen are doing what they can, so that when we do ask them to go overseas, they'll come back, right? They'll get the mission done and they'll come back safely. So we appreciate the support from the community, the interest in the mission here at Shaw, and the opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah, we really appreciate you joining us, and thank you for your service and what you're doing to keep everybody safe. We do have a viewer on here from Charleston that said 2 just flew overhead in Charleston from Joint Base Charleston. So how about that? When we're talking about the sound of freedom, we hear the sound of freedom. How about that? So thanks again, Colonel, for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I'd like to say we planned the timing of that, but we locked those schedules in months in advance, and I'm not that smart. So, but no, thanks again. It was good talking to the team here, and thank you.
Yep, there was a question posted about joining Rotary, and you'll see a comment below that. I believe there's some current active folks on duty from Shaw that are members, so
All right.
that's great as well.
Okay.
Folks that joined us today, thank you very much. We hope you come back on Wednesday at noon. We will hear from Attorney General for the state of South Carolina, Mr. Alan Wilson. Will be with us on Wednesday at noon. Reminder, no CWRAP this Friday. And going forward, starting next Monday, February 1st, CWRAP will only be done Mondays at 11 o'clock. Please remember that. We're going to 1 day a week starting next Monday. With that being said, folks, I'll conclude with the Rotary four-way test. Of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Have a wonderful Monday, folks. Stay dry this week. We'll see you on Wednesday at noon for the next conversation with Rotary Action People. Take care, folks. That's a wrap. Bye-bye.